Thúllu, Pulmúckuj, Pulmúckuj. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of So we've talked about Arodjun, we've talked about Fasvan, Pitham, Nashin. Well, today I'm introducing you to Permechikan. It is another of the many important languages spoken in the World of the Dog Days comic that I am writing, the many stories that I've written throughout my life. This is another big step because the Paramachikan, as you'll see soon, ruled over the Fwonnel Peninsula where Arodjun is spoken for about 300-ish years. So we're going to get into the history, but first let me introduce you to the language itself. Pulmúckuj, the Permechikan language, as we call it in English, by me. So what is Permechikan? Permechikan is a Sern-Cahilan language spoken mainly across the mountains, deserts, and floodplains of southern North America, mainly in what is today Mexico. The Permechikan Empire came to dominate the Fwonnel Peninsula and a vast swath of territory during the height of its power, from around the 1500s AR until its expulsion in the mid-1800s AR. Again, AR stands for after the rediscovery of human technology. This iteration of the Permechikan language is modern Paramachikan, which came to be in the late 1800s and is fully formed by 2000 AR, meaning any Paramachikan speakers that will hypothetically appear in my comics will be speaking this variety of Paramachikan. The ancestor to modern Paramachikan split from Proto-Arodjun around 1200 BR. Now this is over 3,200 years to separate the languages, but they are geographical neighbors. So there are cognates that are recognizable occasionally, and it's common knowledge that both Arodjun and Paramachikan share a common ancestor with each other. It's not some far-flung conspiracy theory like it would be with Nashin. So, history. In the 4700s BR, before the rediscovery, the speakers of Fasvan split into two groups. The Cahilan branch moved west of what we now know as the Mississippi River and towards the Pacific Ocean. The Sern branch spread throughout the Gulf Coast and up to the Appalachians. That's where Nashin went. The Cahilan family moved southward into Mexico with many offshoots, including the Proto-Arodjun branch. By around 1500 BR, Proto-Arodjun speakers became divided in their settlements between the Adjun Valley in western Mexico and the Fwonnel Peninsula to the south. These groups remained in contact, but the Adjun people gradually isolated more and more until the language had fully diverged. The Adjun Valley was a fertile canyon and a volcanic crack carved deep into what we call Mexico. The Proto-Paramachikan civilization that evolved in Adjun remained an isolated kingdom with a strong central government. Expansion occurred very gradually into the interior of the continent along the Adjun River and its tributaries. Though the occasional trade with the Arodjans and nomadic desert and mountain tribes, rumor of a vast fertile plain and an eastern coast fueled further eastern growth. Between 1100 BR and 800 AR, the ancient Permechikan civilization rotated between multiple dynasties and more tribes from the interior of the continent were incorporated into its sphere. As the first Fwonnel Empire reached the height of its power during the 500s BR, an early form of the Jopetoj writing system spread as a language of commerce throughout the continent, reaching the Adjun Valley by around 300 BR. A modified version of this script was developed to accommodate for the Permechikan language, leading to its viral spread across the nomadic groups of the interior and eventually to the Cahilan civilization along the eastern coast of Mexico. To the map on the right, you can see the areas under cultural influence of the Adjun in green, under the Cahilans in orange, and under the Fwonnels or Delsh, depending on what specific year you're looking at, or in around the 200s AR. As the first Fwonnel Empire fell, by around 119 BR, its former vassal states and dependent tribes came to depend more and more on Adjun. Its power began to increase in the region, but its focus remained on piety and order. This changed when the Adjun settlers made contact with western Cahilan in the fertile east coast that had been fabled for so long. The two civilizations shared a writing system already and many cultural traits, and they both desperately wanted a unified trade route to cross the continent. After a few small conflicts and wars, the two civilizations pretty amicably created a unified central government in 243 AR in an event that they called the Day the Oceans Met. Soon later, a new capital city was constructed in the middle of the continent, right where the Cahilan and Daetun trade roads met, which was named Permechikan Documentation for the City of Oceans, the namesake for what would eventually become known as the empire, the kingdom, the country of Permechikan. That's where the name came from. Permechikan was now an enormous kingdom, spanning millions of square miles and connecting the Gulf of California to the Gulf of Mexico. The old Paramachikan language was influenced greatly by Cahilan, but the former Cahilan civilization was gradually subsumed by the new Daetun-dominated Paramachikan culture. From around 400 AR through 1200 AR, a golden age of culture and literacy took place, and seeds of a rivalry with Arodjun were gradually sown. The world order was eventually upset with the prince conquests of the 1270s through 1390s. While Permechikan itself was never fully conquered by the Prince-I, the influence was undeniable and visible in the language in words of formality, technology, and economics. The Prince-I waned in their power in the early 1400s, and amidst the chaos and mass migration during this period, Permechikan came under the control of a prince-speaking dynasty known as the Span. Span Permechikan was much more imperialistic and saw nations bordering the Great Desert such as Ruxalusha, Delshun, and Joan as threats to the Permechikan hegemony. Over the 1500s, it reorganized itself as an autocratic, imperialistic state. After the War of the Pearl between the Paramachikan Empire and a coalition of Fwonnel states, the Parmachikans came to control the largest territory of any nation in known history, ruling the Fwonnel Peninsula from 1563 until 1847. As a multilingual empire, the Parmachikans never really forced their languages on their colonies. It was used only by government officials and those trying to suck up to them, basically. After Alphonse gained independence, and Noshan civilization expanded to the northeast, Permechikan began a gradual decline until it had essentially fully collapsed by 2010 AR. The language is still spoken by millions across the continent, though they mostly live in small decayed villages and semi-nomadic tribes scattered across the interior of the continent. So now, the language itself. In this showcase, we're going to be going over the basics of the modern Paramachikan language, including the phonology, phonotactics and syllable structure, noun cases and inflections, verb conjugations, its adjectives, pronouns, morphosyntax, some basic elements of grammar, orthography, romanization, and a nice little sample text. And again, this language will likely be developed more over time. This showcase is just of the most important elements of what makes this language itself. Go to nga.org for future updates. Paramachikan and Arodjun share a common ancestor in the Proto-Arodjun language, and a lot of mutual influence over the years. Paramachikan remained more conservative than Arodjun overall, but this is still a long period of time. A long time separates Phosphon from both of them, and a long time separates Paramachikan from Arodjun. So, you can see, the Paramachikan root, Urnu, means people, population, came from the Phosphon root, Udv, which meant tribe, and you also have on the other end, Arodjun, Audi, which means a nomadic or roving group. Then you have from the Phosphon root, Rulch, which means animal. You get Paramachikan's Thúllu, which means mammal, and you have Arodjun's Chach, which means animal as well. From Phosphon's Fossa, which means entrails, you get Paramachikan's Yuya, which means stomach, and Arodjun's Ach, which means internal organs. Also from Phosphon, you get Bil, which means brain, which goes to Paramachikan's Buyungu and Arodjun's Binich. So some of those you can see some resemblance, others not so much, and that's okay, because again, a long time is separating these guys. Now, the consonants in Paramachikan are P, B, T, D, K, G, A, F, B, Th, The, S, Z, Sh, Y, H, Ch, R, M, N, Ng, W, L, and Ya. So here's the consonants again, but with the romanization. When I'm writing these things out, there's going to be a few digraphs. Th and the become th, dh. Sh becomes ch, and j becomes j. while y becomes y. I know, a little cringe, but just deal with it. Also, the glottal stop is represented with a Q here. Ng is NG, and that's pretty much anything controversial there. When digraphs are geminated, they're written as TTH, DDH, CCH, and NNG. Also, H is only used for digraphs. That's why I didn't use it for the glottal stop. Forgive me. And the vowels with a Z in quotation marks, because there is actually only one phonemic vowel in Permechikan. That's right, plot twist. This is one of the biggest interesting features about this language, is that there's only one phonemic vowel. It can be pronounced as u, somewhere around there. Just any kind of mushy little vowel. A native Paramachikan speaker would absolutely hate trying to learn like Noshin or something with its many vowels. It can appear stressed or unstressed in a word, and a difference in stress changes the meaning of the word. Stressed vowels are denoted with U with an acute on it. There's a lot of allophony that can happen, often with glides and approximates. It's likely that soon the vowel system will return to something more typical, but at this particular moment in the language's history, its speakers don't recognize differences between vowels. Now, the syllable structure looks like this: S, C, V, F or G, C, S, where C represents any consonant, V represents a vowel, S represents th, the, s, and z, F represents fricatives, G represents glides. The writing system. The Permechikan language uses the Nurug alphabet. It descended directly from the Jopitoj alphabet, created by the Fwonnel Empire for early Arodjun languages. The vowel symbols eventually evolved into numerals, since over time their usefulness faded away for Permechikan speakers. So here's the orthography, right? So the stressed syllable is represented by dots being placed within or alongside letters that exist cosyllabically with the stressed nucleus. Geminated consonants are represented with a line under the letter. Contractions of pronouns or articles that are appended to words are often written as a small superscript letter over the main word. You'll see more of this as we go on. Here's the numbers. So, Nurug originally adopted the Arodjun numeral system wholesale, but by the time of the Paramachikan Empire, the vowel numeral conversion created a fully original numeral system. As you can see here, a lot of these numerals evolved directly from the vowels of Arodjun. Like 2 there came from A, 4 came from E, 7 came from U, and that's right, 7. You see that? The original numerals in here are 1, 2, 4, 7, and 10. This was done because the Parmachikans, during the era where they adopted this numeral vowel system, were minting coins everywhere, and they wanted to have the fewest denominations of coins possible. And so they pretty quickly discovered that 7 is actually a pretty important number whenever you're trying to make the fewest number of coins possible. So that's why 7 got its own symbol there. And eventually the bigger numbers took some of the features of Arodjun's bigger numbers, originally with all those hashes and stuff, and eventually compiled it down to simplified versions of the numbers, making these aesthetic-looking little mini symbols that can make up extremely large numbers with very few strokes. It's pretty nice looking, if you ask me. Names and numbers. Numerals are often placed in personal and place names, not for any kind of pronunciation, but just for the sake of individuality, specificity, and sometimes aesthetics, right? So sometimes this can be used to denote lineage, like in our world there would be like a monarch like Philip IX or something, and you have a number 9 there, but that's only sometimes what it's used for in Permechikan. Sometimes it's essentially just the equivalent of numbers in an online username, you know, like my name Jeff, 69420. So over here on the right you have an example of a person named Chatta, right? So first you have Chatta, just as the 2 symbols that make up the name, Chatta, right there. But then you have what his actual personal name is written as, right here. Still pronounced as Chatta, but you have a number 4 put in between the ch and the geminated ta, and then you have a number 7 stuck right here. If an Arodjun speaker is looking at this, they might think it says chetu or something, but no, it's just aesthetic. Why is it this way? Why did he choose 4 and 7? Maybe Chetu's past ancestors, maybe his past 4 ancestors, were also named Chetu. He's just the 4th. Chetu the 4th, who knows? Maybe this Chetu is the 7th kid with that name in their town. Who knows? Maybe these numbers were just chosen aesthetically, or maybe they represent Chetu's birthday somehow. It depends on the region and really each individual family. There's a ton of different possibilities. So let me know what your Permechikan name / username would look like in the comments below. Now for some morphology. It's got relatively simple noun inflections, 4 cases, inflections based on whether the root end of the vowel or consonant, and there's some irregulars. Then there's lots of derivations. Nouns can be verbalized, verbs nominalized, etc. Adjectives have their own special matrix of conjugations based on their nature. Quasi-agglutinative features, indirect objects can be slapped onto direct objects as prefixes. Some articles can be stuck to objects as prefixes. You can make entire sentences with one word, but they're not very common sentences, so that's why I put a quasi in there. So, the noun cases. We have a subjective-objective case. That's right, if it's the subject or the direct object of the sentence, it gets a single case. It's got genitive, it's got a locative-allative combo case, and a dative case. Right? So, the morpheme is in bold, and the allomorphs that follow are for the inflections, following the vowel final roots and consonant final roots, respectively. You're going to be seeing a lot of these. Then there's some irregular subjective-objective nouns. So, if a word ends with la, ra, tha, fa, or sha, the ul ending in a singular subjective-objective case is elided most of the time, with exceptions where evolution led to excessive homophony. So, right, if you have the root kur, then its subjective-objective form will just be kur, as opposed to kuyu, which would have the subjective-objective form of kuyul, which means glochid. If you don't know what a glochid is, it's like the microscopic spike clusters on cacti, like a prickly pear or something. So, there you go, fun fact for the day. There are a few ways of augmenting or diminishing your nouns. To augment a noun, you can geminate its case suffix in some way, like the ul ending can become ulla, and can become etc. If you want to diminish a noun, you can add a distal article, o, as a prefix. We'll talk about that later. But you could say wukkuf means face, while owukkuf means little face. You can also use the prefixes y and p to augment and diminish nouns respectively. This practice evolved directly from ancient Middle Arodjun influence during the era of the Second Fwonnel Empire. See modern Arodjuns sye for an augmentative and pe for a diminutive. So, examples, you have p'yunuch, which yunuch means rust, so p'yunuch means a little bit of rust. And yumulu, where mulu means balls, and yumulu means big balls. So, the adjectives. Here's our little adjective matrix here. Adjectives typically precede nouns in Paramachikan, but they agree in case with the associated nouns, so it usually doesn't matter. Now, this division of adjectives allows one to distinguish 3 senses of a sentence like he is blue. If you're using the human ending, you're literally saying he is a blue person, like always. If you're using the physical, you're saying he is currently, but not normally, the color blue. Someone painted in blue or something. And non-physical is like a metaphor. He's feeling sad on the inside, if we use the same metaphor from English. Now, articles. So, articles appear preceding a noun phrase when the sentence is anything but definite. There's words for and some, but not the. So, you have indefinite, you have proximate, and distal, aka this, and that. Now, these articles can also be used as subject specifiers when a sentence has multiple clauses, or like a conversation needs to specify between different agents. The indefinite uses oi, the proximate uses m, and the distal uses Also, l, m, and wa can be stuck to the noun or adjective that follows them if the noun in question begins with a vowel. So, pronouns. Alright, as verbs conjugate according to the subject of a verb, prodrop is mandatory. There really are no subject pronouns. Object pronouns may appear independently according to the following table, right? So you got first person, second person, you have a second person formal or a third person animate. So this is like a you, milady, or he, she, they, etc. And then a third inanimate, which is it, right? Then you have singular, plural, and uncountable. Uncountable is for situations where you're talking about a concept or a group of someone. For the second person uncountable, it's used for commands or reflexives. It's pretty versatile. Now, pronouns in the dative or locative cases are attached to their clause's direct object, unless they are uncountable. The uncountable is often used in the rare case in which there is no direct object to attach to it, but usually you don't really need that. Then we have pronouns in the genitive case, which are always independent words and can serve grammatical purposes, including becoming adverbs when paired with certain postpositions. Some of these inflections are more conservative, showing similarities to phosphon pronouns in some case. Like, phosphon has vo, and it becomes wum in modern Paramachikan. Phosphon's locham becomes l'um, phosphon's ram becomes ng'um, etc. Now, compound constructions. These nouns can be verbalized, verbs can be nominalized, adjectives can be nominalized or verbalized, and more. Multiple suffixes from the list below can be piled onto a word to create specific meanings. Pulmúckuj contains pamach and an adjectivalizing form and an objective case, meaning a Paramachikan person. Then you have Agma, which is the verb to become a dead person. It combines the root for death with the perfective form, plus the adjectivalizing human form and the verbalizing form. Now, verb conjugations. Verbs are conjugated according to the person and number of the subject of the sentence. Conjugations usually can be seen as suffixes appended to the root. Primary stress in verbs is always placed on the final syllable, unless it's like a perfective form. Often, this is the only way to tell a verb from a noun. Some conjugations that would otherwise be indistinguishable from nouns feature the additional prefix ur. Tense is represented with prefixes, which are conjugated for their reality, i.e. realis versus irrealis. The tenses are just present, past, and future. Irrealis accomplishes the meanings of conditional, optative, subjunctive, pretty much anything that's not based on actual events. Here's the verb conjugations, again, conjugated for a person and their single, plural, or uncountableness. And then you have those tense and mood prefixes, which are split into their real and irrealis forms. The or prefix, as we discussed, is only really used for first person singular, first person plural, and second person singular in regular verbs where there would otherwise be no way to distinguish them from nouns. If one of these tense prefixes is used on a root that begins with the same sound as the first of the prefix, na, ka, or fa, the initial consonant of the root is elided and the prefix assumes the form of this second table down here. Elements of grammar. The word order in Paramachikan is an optional subject, an optional indirect object, object, and verb. Subjects and objects carry the same case, but often the articles will distinguish the difference in a situation where a subject and an object are adjacent to one another. Adjectives often precede their nouns and are inflected to the same case as their nouns. Postpositions allow for the creation of more specific allatives and locatives, and can also be used with the genitive nouns to create adverbs and adverbials. Now, some sentences can only be one or two words thanks to the partial agglutination, which you'll see. Irregular verbs such as yungun and ngun create perfective and copular constructions. So here's some one-word sentences right here. Let's see if I can get this in the first try. Means, you may have become a dead person. sir. Pulmúckuj, which means you will make construction occur. Again, these sentences are pretty convoluted. And here's some two-word sentences. Which means I give you a child. Which means you might have remembered that instrument for him. And now we have two very important and very irregular verbs, yumúf and mngún. So the verb yumúf, equating roughly to English's have, is used specifically to create perfective clauses, and the object in a yumúf sentence is often a verb in the perfective form. Now the verb mngún, equating roughly to be, is used to create copular verbs and basic descriptive statements. Both verbs have very irregular forms, as you can see, due to their commonality in the Paramachikan language's sentences. In more recent years, mngún, paired with a nominalized verb, is becoming more common in regular speech than yumúf. Now, postpositions. Due to the ambiguity of the dative and locative case, there are a series of postpositions that are placed after a dative, locative, or genitive noun to clarify meaning. A lot of the time, they are actually placed at the end of verbs if there's only one object in the sentence. So, and also genitives with the ta or ra postpositions are often reanalyzed as adverbs. All of these can also be standalone words on their own, like with no vowel or anything. You'll see a single letter R, or a single letter Y, or a single letter S. That one's not on the chart, but you get what I mean. It means I come from the mountains, which means without that little Y at the end, it would just be I come at the mountains, or something like that. It would be weird. Then for negation, you have the word So the word is the negation particle in Permechikan. You place it before a verb, and the verb is negated. Place it before a noun, the noun is negated. Place it before an adjective is negated. I think you get the point. Multiple sequential negatives only intensify the negative. So if someone wanted to say, you're really serious about what you're talking about. Negatives before different parts of speech can counteract each other. Now, modals and infinitives. Infinitive verbs are marked with the shun ending, the default verbal form I've been showing lately. A sentence like, I want to leave, would look like this. Storshun or thurb means leave and I want, so it's I want to leave. Modal verbs like can are marked with the similar to Arodjun's emme. A modal verb like vumma is not conjugated. The verb associated with it is. So the sentence, she can write it, looks like this. Mun lunthor vumma. There's two ways to create sentences with multiple clauses. There's w and urs. So w, which is literally just written as a w, shares an etymology with Arodjun's wu, which is defined generally as and, but can only be used to separate two equal clauses. So this sentence, means this person punches and that person kicks. You also have urs, which is best defined as that or to, and is used to declare that a sentence contains a main and a subordinate clause. Urs is treated as the object of a primary clause, and indirect objects can actually be attached to it too, as you can see in this example sentence. It's the first word in here, thurs, which is you in the dative with the urs attached to it. So you have which means I told you not to go to that place. Those are all the basic elements of the grammar that I wanted to show you. Now it's time for a nice little sample text to cap the whole thing off. The following is an addendum added to the Fort Rook's tablet, essentially Alfwant Consonants' Declaration of Independence, sent from Fort Rook's to the central government of the Paramachikan Empire in 1845 AR by Chuslif Akuvim, the leader of the Arodjun sect of the Alfwant Rebellion. Now keep in mind, the Fort Rook's tablet was written in Arodjun for the Arodjuns, Fwonnels, Rooksolutians, Pokoyans, and Irkans of the Fwonnel Peninsula. This was a copy sent to Permechikan, with this note attached to it in the end, in Permechikan, just to be extra petty. Doi Thullus, Thur Fwonnel urs the cuth chayachur kawil doi malayavol chin thumb dor mum lan thataswon. Doi when doi hung funnest thurnuk tin one with doi bung gurthamo ukwan. The kuyabach kwan sus toath modavum roth yak yuxath zui karar thur wa kuyabach my luck of Fwonnel sus ngurhug sus thurafach flor thur Lya Fwon Chorngus amagt urs lunord lafag yurnor Rachensia Fwonnja Ruxluja Munana Funf Month Yurnor Altham Nepaltham when Nastamam Vayafam Lurasya Naam Adun Commons doi Thayafan Kungradasaya Magullerlanth once us Pulmúckuj Falanth with Fasiag Thwnnel once us Duckach Surachus Yabana Fulferns Thwnnel Radum Stolers Yumúf just love Thabas Rachunsumur. And that's it. Alright, thank you guys so much for watching the premiere of this Permechikan language. I'm very proud of it. I did it in a short amount of time, and I think it's a very important part of the Dog Days world. If you're interested, you gotta stay tuned for future developments in this Dog Days, Dog World cinematic universe, right? The comic I'm making, this is like the 5th or 6th language I've made in the world. There's gonna be more. There's more coming up, so stay tuned in for that. This is a good time to make. I'm so happy that it's here, happy that it's done, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you all. Thank you to the patrons, my special matrons, for supporting me through all of this. Thanks to everyone who's bought a copy of A Grammar of the Arodjun Language. There's a lot of the history and stuff that was discussed in this presentation, and much, much more in the Grammar of the Arodjun Language book, which you can find for $22 on Amazon. If you haven't noticed, the Hunger Games simulator has blown up in popularity like crazy over the past couple months. We're like the most popular Hunger Games simulator online nowadays, so if you haven't played that yet, I recommend it. Try it out. Go show it to others. That's kind of cool. That's pretty much it. I will see all of you in the next video. Hope you enjoyed. Oh yeah, one last thing. Sorry the background here looks kind of sus right now. It looks like just me and Lapis hanging out in the neckbeard nest, right? Yeah, I just moved. I moved in with Schwa, so this is the beginning of our studio space here, our new fancy fandangled studio space. So all the art's gonna start going back up on the wall and more. Start sending me other art on Discord. I'll put it up. Yes. See you guys next time. Nga is